What the Health Tech listeners, I'm your host this week, Justine Abson. This is the podcast where we tackle some of the trending topics, ideas and best practice across health and social care. You might be able to tell we've got a bit of a special episode this week as it's Christmas. So we're going to take a look back over the podcast episodes we've done since we launched in April this year and have a look at some of our industry speakers across health and social care.
In terms of today, I'd like to talk about LFPSE and basically the purpose of it, what we're trying to do with LFPSE, what problem we're trying to solve, and ultimately what are going to be the overall benefits to the NHS.
So we, as patients, the National Patient Safety Team at NHS England and NHS Improvement, we have the remit to collect patient safety information from all providers of NHS-funded care across England for the last almost like 20 years. So we've been doing that, relying in what is today kind of very old legacy systems. One being STIS, that's been around for about 24 years. And the other one is the NRLS, so the National Reporting and Learning System, that has been around for 19 years. So a lot has changed in terms of technology. We're trying to move away from this manual process and make sure that things can happen in the background where those records are shared automatically. So this is one main thing that is going to give a lot of, or release a lot of time from staff within those organizations.
The outcomes and the data integrity and the fact that you're getting the information faster and, you know, in theory it's more accurate. What does that now enable you to do that you couldn't do with NRLS? So if I'm an NHS organization and I'm supplying this information to you, you know, ultimately what's the outcome for this? What's the real driver behind it?
Before, because of all this delay, it would take a long time for us to be able to create any kind of analysis, because we need to allow to have the right volume to start deriving insights and making assumptions from what the signals we are receiving. As now everything is real time, so these insights can be available much quicker.
Paul, I'll just bring you in if I may. So, I mean, you're the first trust to go live, so well done. So after just listening to Marcus there, and obviously you've as I said, just gone live with it. What does that make you think about then in terms of how you're kind of submitting data and the benefits you might see as an organisation?
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen from day one, we've saw the reduction in administration that Marcus was talking about. So as soon as somebody submitted an incident, we know it's gone to LFPSE. We don't need to do the uploads and all the bits that we needed to do with the NRS. So we've seen massive benefits there already. In
terms of that, the things Marcus was mentioning about learning from that data and using those learnings to then bring back into the organisation and to implement improvements, that vision then, I think I'd be interested from your perspective on that community and how you would tie into that vision, because I think that's the goal, isn't it? Obviously, we're talking about improving patient safety ultimately.
Yeah, ultimately that's the goal, to try and make the processes and the care that we provide safer, and make it more efficient, all those sort of things. So that goal of being able to look at things from a national perspective and learn things that are happening across the whole of NHS is really beneficial. And so getting that, like Marcus to say, getting that time back to be able to spend time on looking at those sort of things and looking at what the learning is are really sort of vital in doing that, really.
Back to you then, Marcus. In terms of LFPSE then, what's next? So I know we've kind of talked about things like STIS. So what's the roadmap? What comes next?
As more organizations come on board, so more data becomes available, then more analysis we will switch on, and types of analysis that we'll be able to make. But we need more volume of data, so to enable those functions. So we are doing a lot of work on that aspect, as well as exploring the use of machine learning
Okay. Yeah.
to be able to generate those insights and also to monitor data quality.
In terms of today's session then, guys, I thought it really interesting. I'm conscious I'm going to speak to Paul a little bit more on the next episode. So I'd just like to say thanks for joining us this week.
So we're going to talk a little bit today about mental health first aid training. So firstly, Georgina, you're the trainer for mental health first aid at Curve Learning. It'd be great if you could tell our listeners a little bit more about this and why there is such a need for first aid for mental health.
We work in health and social care, so we've been delivering training on many different courses. But obviously the stress and strain of any kind of work life, especially in health and social care, there does tend to be quite a lot of sickness around that, and it's apparent about the stresses and strains of what the job entails. So we looked into doing mental health first aid as a training course. What's quite pleasing, if I'm honest, is that a lot of the customers that we do get onto our sessions are not from care. So it is quite interesting in that. And I do think that with everything that's been going on in the world, there is definitely a need for looking out for somebody else. And this is why it's been really sort of worthwhile doing the courses.
So every organisation, has a first aid kit. They have trained first aiders on site, but it does feel like mental health first aid is still quite far behind. What do you think workplaces need to do to sort of tackle this and to make it more of a requirement?
I think we really need to be readdressing the duty of care in all workplaces. We look at the well-being of a person. We look at the physical side of a person's well-being. Yet I think we are missing out on that mental health well-being. And I think we do need to look into perhaps the way that HR is looked at, into dealing with, people's personal lives and taking that. It's not just that duty of care 9 to 5 and, whatever you do outside of work, that's your life. It's trying to incorporate it in. It has the impact of what people are going through in their own lives when they are coming into a workplace.
Yeah, I think that why is really important, isn't it? Actually really getting down to the sort of the roots of the issue as well, and really understanding where that comes from.
Yeah, and I do think majority of people that I've spoke to, especially in HR, do want to look at it like that. But I suppose there are a lot of pressures on businesses to have a good workforce and a reliable workforce. And it's interesting when we're looking at the subject of bank holidays being brought up, saying that we're having an extra one for the Queen's birthday. And then they're trying to look into putting this into play each year, purely and simply because of the fact we're giving people days off as a bank holiday. It actually helps with the well-being, the productivity of work, so it's not looking at the quantity of how much we're going to do, but actually the quality of what we're going to do and the quality around the staff and supporting the staff.
Could you give us an overview of what someone on the course could maybe take away from this?
Yeah, I think when people come onto the course, they are obviously there because they want to become mental health first aiders. I think what a lot of people do take away from the course is their own reflection. But sometimes I think we look and think we couldn't help. We're not qualified to help. And I think with the course, the course focuses such a lot on, it's not there to diagnose an illness. It is just there to signpost and show that there is that chance of the hope of the recovery and everything. And it's just sort of focusing on just being there to listen to somebody can be, as well as, thinking that, oh my gosh, I'm going to sort of get them to the doctors or anything. It's just that first point can be a huge step for somebody. And I do think a lot of people do reflect on their own prejudgments coming into the course.
I know from my own experience, I'd certainly recommend the mental health first aid course, particularly for anybody that is in a people-focused role. I found it so informative, and I definitely had a much better understanding of it in terms of how I could help someone in the future. So thank you very much for joining us and kind of talking about, like I said, such a complex topic. So we're going to talk a little bit today about women's health and the series of papers that you're working on. So can you tell us a little bit more about why the series of work focusing on women's health in particular was started?
Yeah, so I mean, when I joined PPP in January 2021, we're halfway through the pandemic at that point, and it's very clear that health inequalities have been, exacerbated, and particularly that burden was falling on women in terms of health outcomes, but also in terms of when everyone's stuck at home, the amount of unpaid labour that women are doing as opposed to men. And particularly, it felt like it was the right time to do something.
The first international women's report, which is titled A Women's Health Agenda Readdressing the Balance, was published in March this year, coinciding nicely with International Women's Day.
Yeah.
So what does this report cover?
So, I mean, women's health can be quite a saturated space. So we wanted to do something that was not just another women's health report, and sort of stereotype of women talking to other women moaning about women's issues. Do you know what I mean? That's quite overdone. And so what we wanted to do, there was nothing in what we were doing which was reinventing the wheel. We were not trying to come up with anything fancy or innovative. We were just looking at the current health policies that were in place for women, and I suppose critically analysing them and going, why is it that a woman, has to get a prescription every time she wants a contraceptive pill when it's been around for 60 years? Why is it that, a man can get a vasectomy, a woman wants an abortion, she has to get, 2 medical signatures on a form? So it was kind of just going over what was out there and how we could, produce good policy to kind of change that and change the dial slightly. Very few people know what's normal and what's not. I mean, all I knew about a period when I was taught about them was not to get toxic shock syndrome. And I've never met a woman that's ever had it, but I didn't know what was normal, And so I think it's that women themselves are not taught about their own bodies. We're not educated on what we should be looking out for, what's normal and what's not. And I think, so firstly is talking about it. Is a way to remove that stigma. But I think as well, it's about getting the men on side too, and that it's very easy for women to talk to their friends and sit in the pub and talk about, their periods or, whatever it is. But you need to talk to men about it as well, because ultimately, the system we live in, lots of men are in power. So you need to get them on side as well. I think that's probably a key thing.
That bit about talking about it is massive, really.
I think as well, we've seen that with Davina McCall and this menopause, she's a celebrity figure that said, talking about menopause for the first time, and suddenly now everyone's talking about the menopause. Well, it's not new. It's not like it's a new health condition. Do you know what I mean? It's been around since the beginning of time. And it's only now that it's in the public consciousness that this is a condition that women go through. Everyone will go through it, and people should be aware of it. So, I think, the kind of waves of sort of women's health progress is being made, but it's not consistent.
No one ever knows why a woman's going to go and get an abortion.
Yeah.
So it's to kind of be able to do it at home, in the comfort of your home.
Yeah.
And know that, like you said, like when it happens, you're not on a bus, you're not, in the car park or whatever that might be. Definitely feels like it will be a lot less traumatic for the woman involved as well.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is that, we've seen, particularly in America, which is, supposedly a liberal democracy, abortion is being illegalized. It's being made illegal in certain states.
Yeah, of course.
So you can't ever take for granted women's health. The gains that we've made, we can't take them for granted, because if somewhere like the US can then make abortion illegal, no one's safe from it. And, the thing is what I always say is, if you make abortion illegal, you're not going to stop women having abortions. Women are going to have abortions anyway, but they're going to do it in an unsafe way, and they're going to die potentially. So you don't. If you make something more difficult, you don't stop it happening.
Lottie, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great to have you, and obviously to talk about such important topics that people don't feel comfortable talking about as well. And I think this series of papers is just going to help raise that awareness. And, you know, I, for one, will kind of take away talking to my friends more about some of these issues. So yeah, really appreciate you joining us today.
So have you ever had any or seen any kind of, or has anything stood out to you, like a standout moment where you've really impacted either a patient or an NHS worker or a healthcare worker?
I've mentioned the duty of candour. It should never be talked about without mentioning one particular family and one particular man, actually, who's done more than anyone else to raise awareness of the need for that legal duty of candour. It's a man called Will Powell, who lost his son, Robbie Powell, over 25 years ago now, through an avoidable incident where there was an attempted cover-up. And they've campaigned relentlessly, that family, and Will in particular, and were kind enough to let us borrow Robbie's name for our campaign. We called it Robbie's Law, which is the duty of candour.
Amazing people, really, that they've had the strength to do what they've done in a situation like that. Really strong.
Yeah, it's just immense being able to mix with such strong and powerful people who've suffered such adversity, and also to have had the privilege of working with some of the best doctors and nurses committed to patient safety that there are. And also, I have to say, some of the best lawyers who are committed to human rights and justice for people who need it.
Yeah, it's really heartwarming to see how many people are dedicated to improving this, whether they work in healthcare or not. It's amazing. Like, I'm inspired every day when I see it, really. And when we spoke, I was really inspired by what you do, and I definitely wanted Radar Healthcare to be a part of that, and be a part of that change that I know you're gonna impact, essentially. How do other organisations like Radar Healthcare get involved, and what is it that you look for in a partnership as well?
Partners for Patient Safety is an initiative we've launched to actually demonstrate that industry and business have an important role to play in patient safety, which isn't given the status that it deserves. And it's a corporate membership scheme that allows companies like yours, but others also in the medtech world, to actually get involved with AVMA to demonstrate that we're on the same wavelength, that we're after the same things, to demonstrate corporate responsibility for doing good in your space in society, because the income from this scheme is also helping fund the work of the charity. And at the moment, we get no statutory funding. So all the funding we get is we go out and get it or benefit from partnerships like this. So we are appealing to any companies who operate in the patient safety space, if they feel it's appropriate, to get involved, to become one of our partners for patient safety. And we think over time we'll become a really, really powerful voice, where the voice of industry, of medtech, of patients and families combine to get really important messages across.
And I definitely am proud that we are part of that, because I think it's really important, and I think it's going to have the impact that we're hoping for in the future. And like you said, it's not going to happen overnight, is it? It's going to be a long process, but we're seeing steps being taken already, and this is the space to be in, because we're going to have the biggest impact on people's lives, really.
Our collaboration with you and potentially other companies as well, demonstrates that any initiative like that can be helped and supported through good technology, through good services and products. And doing that can actually make it easier for people to do the right thing.
What would your advice be to people who want to step up and support patient safety more, or campaign for patient safety, but are maybe a bit nervous to be that person to stand up and do it?
People should seek out where they can get support. Now, in terms of patients and families, that it's primarily AVMA, my charity, but there are other charities that they might be connected with also that can give them support and confidence and even training or mentoring to actually become a champion for patient safety and justice. And we're doing that a bit within our own organisation, is actually promoting those individual champions for patient safety as well and supporting them. But staff need that nurturing, that mentoring and support also. So there are opportunities, just identify where you can connect with the appropriate organisation, be it AVMA, be it the Doctors Association, be it NHS England and Improvement. There are places for you to go.
Well, honestly, it's been great to talk to you, and I am a huge supporter of what you guys do. I always will be. And I'm so glad that we can be a part of it and a part of that important work that you're doing. So thank you so much for sharing.
So thank you very much for joining us this week. Thank you for listening. We're going to be back next week with another special episode ahead of New Year. If you have any questions for us or our guests, please email whatthehealthtech@radarhealthcare.com. And in the meantime, have a very Merry Christmas.